Hello and welcome to episode 77 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp. Michael and Jamie will not be joining us tonight, but I have Kevin Tumlinson and John L. Monk with us. How are you guys doing?
Super. I'm good, man.
So thanks for coming, filling in for us.
Well, you know me, I don't do enough podcasts. So
yeah. What do you got 3 going right now, right?
I've got 3 going at the moment, and another one in the works.
And so both of these guys have been on the show before, and again, thanks for coming. I think, Kevin, you've been on a couple times, and John's been here at least once, just the once, I think, so far, John?
Just the once.
And so Kevin is the author of the Sawyer Jackson series, among a whole bunch of other things. So Sawyer Jackson and the Long Land, and then Sawyer Jackson and the Shadow Strait. And we got a third one in the works.
It's in the works. White Room is coming. White Room is coming. I'm going to use that as a marketing slogan. The White Room is
like
coming.
Winter is coming. Is it going to take 20 years?
Yeah, I'm just going to have. I'm going to have Sawyer just standing on a wall somewhere. The White Room is coming.
And when do you think that's going to be coming out?
In time. As you guys are aware, I just moved. We just sold our home, and we're getting ready for a. We're working toward an RV lifestyle, so it may be a bit before I'm back on track, like a week or 2 before I'm back. So hopefully I can get it done really quickly. I know I can get it done really quickly. I just don't know when I'm going to start.
And John is the author of the Jenkins Cycle, which is Kick, Fool's Ride, and Hopper House. And are you working on anything right now, John?
Yes, I am. I'm actually writing a post-apocalyptic with no zombies. It's going to be more like a standard post-apocalyptic, and it's very interesting because I'm writing it in third person, which is different from my usual fare of first person. So
cool. Did we get to know what kind of apocalypse, or is it a secret?
Well, it's a disease-based apocalypse where people die. I think it's closer to The Stand, I guess, than anything else. And it's actually inspired by Stephen King. And what else? I like to keep a single point of view. I don't like jumping around to different heads and stuff like that. I always enjoy those types of novels more. So I'm going to try my best not to jump off to somebody like the villain's head, even though it's difficult.
Yeah, especially in third person.
Yeah, it's really easy. I always thought, and I don't know if this is true, but I've always thought that writers who are jumping around to different heads they like get bored, or they get and like they want to do something different. Yeah, I know, but it's not like it can't be done well. So.
Okay, so we'll start our discussion with these, do a weekly roundtable and talk about some of the things we've been reading lately, and I'll go left to right on my screen. So John, would you like to go first? What have you been reading lately?
Wow, my voice. I read perhaps one of the best books I've read in the last 5 years. I already sent you a screaming rave review about it and told everybody that will listen to me that The Long Walk by Stephen King is absolutely fabulous. I couldn't put it down. I actually am going to read it again because it's sort of like an inspiration. It's to my writing, and I don't know how he did it, but he really captured me. And the funny thing is I got to give some props out because you can hear about this book from anywhere, but I heard about it on the Horror Writers podcast with Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon. They had a show about Stephen King stuff that they had liked, and I listened to that, and I'm like, that sounds like an amazing book, and damn it was. So anybody who's interested in listening to a pretty good podcast, that's a good one, the Horror Writers podcast. The other book, there's 2 other books, well 3, I'll make it quick, that I've been reading. One is Tales of the Apocalypse, you've probably heard way too much of in the last couple weeks. I've loved every story I've read. I've read about 60%, and they're really good. It was Stephen Bowles' Protector, had me almost crying, but it was really dust in my eyes because I'm kind of manly. So those stories are really good, and it's an unusual anthology in that I still haven't run into a bad story yet. There's always some stinker somebody invited their friend into or they had to fill out because somebody dropped out and they got a bad story, but they did their best. But this hasn't had one so far.
Give it time.
Yeah. The last one I would say is something called the Story Grid by Sean Coyne and Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah.
I think it's probably more Sean Coyne with Stephen Pressfield's name. They called themselves business partners, but it started out where Sean Coyne was the editor that pushed to get Gates of Fire published and took that on for Stephen Pressfield. Now, I love all of Stephen Pressfield's little self-helpy things like War of Art and Turning Pro. Big, important reads there for anybody out there who, even if you're not a writer, you just want to read something inspiring about, and how to live your life. Those are great. The Story Grid, though, is for writers, and I actually wanted to read like little 6 points. Real quick, what it is, the Story Grid says, these are the things that you need to hit in your book when you're writing it to have the story work. The story will not work if your love story doesn't have a first kiss, or if your detective story doesn't have finding the body, or bringing the villain to justice for most detective stories. All genres have to hit certain things, and the book will get boring if you don't have like an inciting incident and a goal and a like opening on a positive and ending on a negative and starting the next thing on a negative and ending on a positive, or a double negative, as he would say. So they have to hit these things, and he has a way of gridding them out, and he does this for books like Silence of the Lambs and things like that. And I thought they were really good. And what I thought I'd read real quick, and it's not long, is these 6 points that Stephen Pressfield asks of himself before he actually writes a novel. Okay, he calls it the Fool's Cat method. It's like a super short form of the Story Grid. He asks himself, what is the genre? He wants to know if it's fantasy or thriller, because that defines everything else that happens. Things like that. The next one is, what are the conventions and obligatory scenes for that genre? The next one is, what is the point of view? Right? And then there's, what are the protagonists' objects of desire? What do they want? What's the controlling idea and theme? What's the beginning hook, the middle build, and the ending payoff? So, although the Story Grid sounds kind of like a formulaic way of churning out a story, it's anything but that. It's like you're going to have these things. You should know that you have to have these things. Make sure you have these things. And so I love reading it. The other thing I would say is, and I think this is probably Stephen Pressfield's influence, is if you've ever read War of Art, it's like these little short sections on what, the War of Art, the things he's talking about. The Story Grid reads a little bit like that. Like you can read one little section every morning before you go to work. So I really like that. What else?
The Story Grid.
What's that?
It's definitely that too. Read it, Kevin?
Absolutely. You cut out there. What were you asking?
I was just asking, have you read the Story Grid?
No, I haven't. I've heard a lot about it, and I know that Nick. I think that actually Justin Sloan had read it as well, but Nick Pecker, I know, has read it. I think we've talked about it on our Self-Publishing Answers podcast.
Right.
I haven't read it because I'm a slacker.
I think it's definitely a book that you'll come back to over and over again, because there are some things that he talks about but doesn't flesh out because there's no room. I mean, with the positive and negative shifts in polarity and certain things, of course, he doesn't go into all of the possible ways that can work. I think on his blog he's starting to break down more of the individual genres. He spends most of his time in that, well, really all of his time in that book talking about Silence of the Lambs and breaking it down, which kind of makes me want to read that book or at least watch the movie again. But I think he like I said, he started breaking down on his blog some of the other genres a little more specifically as well. That's a great book.
Yeah, that's the part actually. Knowing what the genre expectations are, that's the thing I really would like to get a book on, because as I'm writing this post-apocalyptic book, I want to know what I'm supposed to hit. Now I've read them before, but when you're reading a story, you're thinking right brain or something. You're not thinking left brain. You don't record these things as well as you should.
I would think that post-apocalyptic is more of a setting, not necessarily a genre, right? Where
Yeah.
is it a love story or a revenge story, escape, mystery? That you can put any one of those genres into your
Yeah,
post-apocalyptic
it
setting.
happens to be one of those rare settings though that overpowers the genre. So that's why you see so many different types of storytelling on shows like Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm.
That's a post-apocalyptic landscape, but you have romance stories, you have action adventure, you have there's a thousand different stories going on, and different genres of stories going on as well. So it's hard to determine what genre that show actually falls into.
Right, because
Sci-fi, I would say.
yeah, like we've said before, like that show could very easily take place with an alien invasion instead of
Yeah,
zombies, and
exactly.
tell the exact same story, which Falling Skies
Falling
does.
Skies, right? I was going to call that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
miss
kind of
that show.
comforting. That's kind of comforting because I can do all the positive, negative stuff, and I can build character that people like and things like that.
Yeah.
But being able to call it post-apocalyptic and sort of stick to people's expectations of what the end of the world, an end of the world kind of thing would be, that's kind of like an open sort of thing that I think I can handle in my story.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, did you ever read The Road?
Yep, and there's a bit of inspiration in there. In fact, I was going to mention the other thing I'm reading is Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian for the second time, and I'm doing that for some of the mood that he's able to kind of get you in the mood for when you go sit down to write. I'm not saying the book is going to be Blood Meridian moody, but it's going to have a few kind of dark elements like that. That's another great book, by the way, Blood Meridian. I just wish that they would release Cormac McCarthy books like abridged to have quotation marks. It kills me. I need quotation marks to know who the hell's talking and when the hell they stop.
That's the best way to absorb a Cormac McCarthy book is audiobook.
Thank you for that tip. Thank you.
Pro tip, everybody.
So is that your reading then, John?
It's pretty much it, yeah.
Okay. How about you, Kevin?
I have quite a list actually. I'm going to truncate it though because we'll be here all night. But because you know how I am with I read a lot of nonfiction, and I have some fiction books on the palette, or on the plate. I mean, but right now I'm reading What the Dog Saw, which is Malcolm Gladwell's kind of collection of articles and essays he wrote. I think for like the New York Times or Washington Post. I can't remember which. And I like Gladwell's stuff, and I keep telling everyone around me I'm going to start writing something a little more like Gladwell's work, more essay style writing for a bit, just for the fun of it. So once I kind of round up a few fiction projects, I was thinking about doing that. So I'm calling this research. But in the same vein, I'm reading A Short History of Nearly Everything, which is Bill Bryson's science-themed tome, which I've been threatening to read for a while. I recently read A Walk in the Woods, so I got on kind of a Bryson kick for a while there, and that one's it's enjoyable. It's a little, I don't know. I'm not as into it as I was into Walk in the Woods, though. I guess I don't relate to it as much. The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat is also on the list.
I've done that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm enjoying it, but it's a little dry in the beginning. But I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm reading a lot of these that have.
Is that Bill Bryson as well?
That is Oliver Sacks.
Okay.
Who is I guess a psychiatrist? Not entirely sure. I just finished reading. The book is called Abundance. The Future is Better Than We Think. I think that's the title. By Peter H. Diamandis and Stephen Kotler, which is, if you haven't read that, you really should pick that up. The thing I dig about that book is that it's very positive and affirming look at how we're actually better off than we ever thought we were, and thanks to the technology that we kind of keep blaming for modern day problems, but because of things like mobile phone technology and everything that sort of surrounds that industry. Now we've got entire nations in Africa who are, for the first time, getting on the internet and learning and growing and creating their own technology. And so that's what that book is about, is sort of the abundance of resources that we actually have and how it's actually getting better and making our lives better. So that was a fascinating book. It was my favorite, the favorite thing I've read in the past couple of months. And then
And
on
that
the
was just
fiction,
called
What's the name again?
Abundance.
it's called Abundance. Let me see if I can get the full title. Abundance: The Future is Better Than You Think.
Okay.
And that's a fantastic book if you want to come away feeling hopeful. I actually now want to start volunteering for some programs, and I never thought about this before, but app development as a means of saving the world is now an option. So I'm kind of thinking about tinkering around with that. On the fiction plate, though, I'm really the only book I'm reading right now is The Girl with All the Gifts, which I've heard people rave about. People that frankly I never hear rave about books or talking about this book, so I'm really enjoying it. I'm only about a third of the way through at the moment, but it's fantastic so far.
That's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got hint. I purposely avoided listening to anything, reading anything. I don't want to know anything about the book. I will say though that it's reminding me an awful lot of Justin Cronin's Passage. The Passage.
Okay.
If you haven't read those books, I think he published The Passage. He published The 12, I believe, is the second one, and the third one is coming out, which is his sort of post-apocalyptic vampire slash zombie slash whatever. The virals are the creatures in that book, and I've only gotten a small way through The Girl with All the Gifts, but I'm already kind of seeing parallels there, so I think it may be in the same vein. He said, "Boom, still got it."
Have you read The Girl with All the Gifts, John?
Isn't that the one where everybody dies at the end violently?
I'm thinking that's it. Yeah. Oh no, you're thinking Titanic.
No, I haven't read it, but it's funny. There's a certain class of books that have certain types of covers and certain types of titles that I just sort of gloss over and move on. So when people like Kevin say you should read this book or whatever, that makes me perk up a little bit. That happened with Memoirs of the Geisha, the Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood that my wife had me read when we were first dating. Never would have read it. I loved it. It was actually really good. So.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Patrick. I was just going to say, don't expect The Girl with All the Gifts to be like, Memoirs of the Geisha. It's nowhere.
You like that?
I did. I love that book. I thought
it's
it was
women's fiction. I mean, that's what.
That's not what this book is, though.
Oh, isn't it?
No.
Okay. That's actually, that book, Girl with All the Gifts. I mean, it has a great cover.
Yeah.
It is not a genre. I'm going to say genre appropriate. I mean, it's just the cover does not tell you at all what the story is about.
Right.
And I also, it was David Wright that recommended it to me, and he also had said, like, do yourself a favor and don't read any of the reviews. Don't read anything about this book. Just read the book and then you look at the reviews or whatever after. Not because it's getting terrible reviews or anything, just because it's a book you kind of want to read cold.
Hey, Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, last note on this book is that because it doesn't advertise this at all, it is a post-apocalyptic story.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right, so that's definitely.
Now you're excited. Now you're in.
Well, it's gone beyond this idea that it was maybe women's fiction, which I love women and I love fiction. It's Oprah book club stuff. Hey, I wanted to add actually one more thing to my my had read list, and I'm going to make it darn quick, okay? But I reread Midshipman's Hope by David Feintuch, and then I immediately bought book 2, and then I was like, well, I'm spending too much money because I really want to buy book 3. So that's the other thing I read, and I highly recommend it to anybody who likes space opera. I consider it like the greatest space opera I've ever read, other than maybe Dune. They're right up there together. And that's it. I'll shut up. I took another turn. Sorry.
It looks like they're all on Unlimited. Are you on KU?
No, I refuse.
All right. I think I've identified your problem right there.
So I'll go through my list. I read most of Gregor the Overlander, which is the first book in a series that Suzanne Collins wrote before she wrote The Hunger Games. It's a 5-book series, and I got through as much of it as I could before I gave up. It is YA. It's there were just something. So if you've read The Hunger Games, which I'm assuming both of you probably have,
Yep.
um, one of the problems I found with those books were it takes a really long time to get to the darn Hunger Games. She spends a lot of time setting stuff up. She also, it's interesting to see in these books, her background is in screenwriting, and in all three of the Hunger Games books are exactly 27 chapters, 3 sections, like 9 chapters per section, and it looks like these books are set up the same way. It's just the way she does it. But I got 2/3 of the way through this book, and was still waiting for it to kind of get to the point, get to the like the second section of the book is called The Quest, but it's still gathering the people and the resources that they're going to need to go on this quest.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to a point where I realized I just didn't care anymore. I've seen reviews from some kids who read it who said it's too scary because it takes place in this the Underland, which is basically this massive city underneath New York, and it's populated by some people, but also cockroaches, rats, bats, and spiders are all sort of the main factions, I guess. So some younger kids, I guess, find it a little too dark and scary, and others just absolutely love it. So it might be worth checking out if you've got kids who like the YA stuff, but I just found that it wasn't for me. And I also then I read Book 2 or Volume 2 of Saga, the Brian K. Vaughan series. Have either of you seen that or checked it out at all?
No.
It's a fantastic graphic novel. I've got the first 5 volumes, which is probably the first like.
Oh,
30.
you know what? I did read the first one. I haven't
Okay.
read the rest, but I read the first one.
And the thing that's really standing out for me in this one is just I'm going to say villains, but they're not. This is one of those series that just does an amazing job of making it clear that although the characters might have opposing goals, and to the main characters, all of these other groups that are sort of coming after them seem like evil people or bad people. They really show you those stories as well, and you can see that one of the bad guys is just doing what he is doing so he can get back to his pregnant wife on his planet, and another one is just trying to track down her fiance so she can get some rings back. And anyway, so the villains aren't really villains, which they just do a great job there. I wanted to read more of his, again, Brian K. Vaughan, his new series, We Stand on Guard, which is the series where America attacks Canada and tries to take over because they want our water in the future. And I stopped reading it. I read the first one. I really enjoyed it. And then I stopped because for some strange reason, I don't know, this is one of those things between Amazon Canada and US. Like, I think there's 5 issues that have been released so far. And for some reason in Canada, you can't get issue 4. It's not on the website. It's just
Interesting.
It's just not there for some reason, and I can't figure it out. And I'm not going to continue a series that if there's going to be a hole in the middle. So if they can figure that out and resolve it, then maybe I'll pick it back up again. But until then, I'll stick with Saga.
That's cool.
That is my reading. So we don't have a specific topic to talk about, but
Can I ask
a few
a
things
question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to ask a question about Saga. It's a graphic novel, right?
Yes.
All right. So look, I tried to read the Walking Dead graphic novels, and I've never been a comic book fan because the stories were always like you got a picture in a bubble, right? And I've always, ever since I was like a little kid, I've read novels, but I wanted to read the Walking Dead. And everything in the bubbles, like every other word was emphasized, and and I got so distracted by the overemphasizing of every other word that I gave up. And I'm looking for a graphic novel with a great story, cool pictures, good writing that doesn't do that and doesn't distract me with stuff like that. Would you say this was one of them?
I haven't noticed that, but I'm not looking for it either. But I will say, so the story is told, or is sort of the primary narrator of this story is the baby that has just been born. Like, she's telling the story from kind of looking back on her life and talking about her parents' lives and you know how she came to be. So you will see characters may interact and they're speaking, you know, in their little speech bubbles, and then somewhere else in the frame there will be text that is within the image itself, like somewhere down below or wherever, and it's her talking to you, explaining what was happening. So I mean, that could. I don't find it distracting, and in fact, the Amazon, like the Kindle reader on the, I noticed on the phone and the tablet did a great job. It didn't need to do this on the tablet, but like when you're looking at the individual frames, so it'll zoom in on the top frame, and then when you swipe, it goes to the next frame rather than the next page. And I noticed when I was looking at on the phone when it was a little bit smaller, it actually did a good job of when I swiped, it would zoom in on that little piece of text within the frame, almost to kind of make sure that you didn't miss it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. And some frames you'd swipe and it would, if it was a smaller frame with like sort of, or a more complex frame with stuff going on in it, which maybe meant the dialogue was a little bit smaller, it would zoom in on that part of the frame so that the dialogue was big enough for you to see. So it's not perfect, but I'm really impressed with the way that the things that they're doing. So you don't have to get like a separate CBR comic book reader.
Yeah, Amazon actually purchased Comixology a couple of years ago.
That would explain it.
So they've integrated that, and if you are a Comixology, if you have that app, you can log in with your Amazon account. So you can actually pick up a whole world of comics and graphic novels, and some are pretty cheap, and sometimes they'll give some away. So if you're interested, check out that app. You can log in with your existing Amazon ID. I don't know if it's going to be the same in Canada, Patrick. I'm sorry.
It never is.
It never is.
But I would say too, John, I mean, just download the sample and check it out.
Cool. I actually downloaded the Comixology app, and it was after a Simon Whistler episode where they had a guy on talking about comics, and I looked at it, and I thought it was really cool what they'd done. You know, like you swipe the page, and like 3 things pop up on the screen that weren't there. But you know, the background was sort of the same, you know, and new words popped up and stuff, and I thought that was really cool.
Some of them are like that, and some of them are more of it's a static image that it just sort of zooms in on. So it just depends on the comic, and you know that stuff takes a lot of work. So those guys they tend to just do what works.
They should do with the technology now, they should do a big graphic novel, sort of, you know, choose your own adventure type thing. You can. Interesting.
Yeah.
Get Michael Laurent on that.
Yeah, I was about to say he and Justin can do that. I'll leave all that work to those guys.
Yeah. So speaking of The Walking Dead, I don't think this is a spoiler because I think Kevin spoiled it for me. How do we feel about? No, it was that. How do we feel about Glenn being alive?
I love it. I don't watch the show to watch people die. I don't get off on, like, ooh, you know, they're being so realistic. They just killed the baby, you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm happy he's alive. I like it when everybody's alive and in a little bit of danger. When people die, I feel upset, you know, whether it's in real life or in fiction. I like happy endings. I like weddings at the end.
Hopefully we're not spoiling this, by the way, for people watching and listening.
Are we talking about Glenn?
We'll use a code name. Ben. Ben died on the Running Dead.
It's always interesting to see the show when you're following along with the comics as well, to see which parts diverge. And
I have purposefully avoided the graphic novels and comics for that because I didn't read them beforehand. I'd kind of seen them and heard of them, but I never got into them, and I don't want to do it. The same reason I won't read the Game of Thrones books. Like I just don't want to know in advance what's happening. I'll go binge read both those when everything's done and the smoke kind of clears, but I just don't want to know. I'm enjoying the shows too much.
I started the Game of Thrones, and all these nice people are getting hurt, and there's like the R word is kind of happening, and I don't like reading brutality. It's funny, I write some brutality in my stupid stories, but I can't read it when other people are kind of doing it. It means a lot to me. So, but I can watch it in kind of like an hour format because it's quick. It's like,
well, you're only half a monster then.
yeah, like awful stuff happens and then it's over. Awful stuff happens and it's over. You know.
Yeah. Wow.
But you can write it, so that's good.
I can write it a little bit. You know, you've read my books. I mean, how much of a monster am I, Patrick?
There's some pretty rough stuff in there, but nothing terribly graphic, right?
Yeah.
So there's not like blood spurting, and there's no gore.
It's
Not
funny.
sure.
So
I think
He's
there
working
was
on a post-apocalyptic story now, though. So
there was in book 2. I actually got dinged with some 2 and 1-star reviews over on Goodreads because people said it was too dark. But the funny thing is like, and I don't really mind spoiling this because like nobody's gonna read my book. But they were
positive, John.
they were descriptions of a guy watching a movie that had a lot of gore in it, or descriptions of the main character reading a book that had a lot of gore in it. You know, he rides the people who are awful people. It was this writer who writes really awful books. So the readers were reading the story about the main character reading a book or watching a movie, and then they abandoned the book because my book, they said, was too gory or too, it's too dark and stuff like that. So I actually feel bad for those folks. One of the people, I actually, I never do this, but she was nice. She finished book 2, and she said it had a satisfying ending. So I wrote her and I said, look, I knew you were kind of on the fence about reading book 3. You should read it. It's kind of like, a lot lighter, and she read it and she loved it and stuff like that. And
well, that's
I'm not trying to plug myself, by the way.
But there's it's dark just by virtue of the story you're telling, right? I mean, the main character, and this isn't a spoiler, is in the situation he's in because he committed suicide. Right. He's sort of paying for that, but he also, there's a lot of sort of humor throughout it as well. So he kind of tries to take sort of a light-hearted view on some of the things that are happening to him, and he just tries to enjoy his rides even though he knows he has a job to do, and that, I think, sort of balances it out as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I actually kind of enjoy about Walking Dead, by the way, is the fact that, it's true, it can be unbelievably gory. And my wife refused to watch it for the first couple of seasons, 2 or 3 seasons, because of that. And then one day she got sucked into a story. She was literally just walking in the door, coming home from work or something, and she got sucked into a story. And so we had to go back and watch every single episode and catch her up. But what I like about Walking Dead is the gore plays a role, but it isn't constant. I mean, you have that as a sort of an emphasis on a moment, and it makes that moment more tense or more emotional, and then you move on from it. And you see tons of blood, and there's all kinds of gore going on. But for the most part, when you see the characters, even after a big epic zombie attack, they're covered in blood, but it's no worse than them being covered in dirt and oil and grime or whatever. I mean, it doesn't really seem to faze you anymore. But in that moment,
well, that's interesting too, because like as viewers, if somebody was to watch, say a random episode from this season, they might be kind of terrified, but we as the viewers have kind of taken that ride and become sort of it doesn't bother us as much, kind of like the characters have, right? The first, they were horrified at what was going on around them, and now they're kind of immune to it. Not immune to it, but able to handle it better. The gore has gotten a lot better as well, like the special effects, and so that's a good thing too.
Hey, what do you think of? I'm sorry, John. I think I may be on a slight delay, so I keep cutting you guys off. I apologize. But I wanted to ask though, what you think of the fact that basically they killed off Shane because he was too much like what Rick has become. Like, what do you think of that whole sort of
It's
subplot?
not the same. It's not the same.
No?
Rick is, Shane was I'm out for myself, screw everybody else. If you slow me down, or if my leg is hurt, I'm going to shoot you in the leg so the zombies eat you.
I remember that. That was awesome.
He's just a dick, and Rick will save other people before himself. All these comparisons between Shane and Rick, it's like, it's totally false. He's not the same guy as that guy.
They became different. Yeah, even before the apocalypse, he wasn't. I mean, he was. They were. We didn't get to see a whole lot of that, but you definitely got that sense. So one of the questions I had for you guys too was, again, I get kind of screwed here in Canada, but have you checked out the Barnes and Noble? So Barnes and Noble launched their audiobook line or application. Have either of you had a chance to check that out and see kind of what they've got?
That's cool, though. I never heard of it. That's really cool. They need to do something. So
I haven't checked it out because I'm an Audible subscriber, so there's really, I don't know if there's going to be a benefit for me. I'm sure they're doing something promotional right now, but I'm well taken care of on the audiobook front.
They do that leap to sort of overcome, don't they? The fact that they're coming late to market. I'm assuming that Audible and ACX, the contracts there are probably, there's some exclusivity concerns there where people can't just take what they've got up on Audible and load it up on whatever Barnes and Noble's doing.
The contracts are exclusive if you agreed to that. If you just use ACX, you can get into ACX, I believe. I mean, I know for a fact you can put books on Audible without being exclusive to Audible. But I don't know if that involves ACX or not, actually. I haven't played with that part. But yeah, for the most part, the rule of thumb is going to be if you're on Audible through ACX, you probably are not allowed to put your book on Barnes & Noble. Not the exact same book.
But they might sell to Barnes & Noble later. Like they actually distribute to iTunes, even though Amazon's a competitor. So your ACX books are going to go to iTunes. So I can sort of see Barnes & Noble like making a deal where they can get stuff on their app.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, I love Barnes & Noble right now. They just did a Nook Free Friday run for me, and I gave away like 11,000 copies of Kick. So and they did this like out of nowhere. So I'm super stoked about Barnes & Noble right now. So I'm going to be nothing but positive about Barnes & Noble right now.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on close to like 40 or 45 minutes, and Kevin has apparently got 4 or 5 Thanksgiving dinners to attend this week. Yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah. Is it the full turkey dinner tonight, or
actually this one's going to be chicken tortilla soup prepared by my wife for her in-laws. Yeah. We do this up right, man. Thanksgiving is definitely our holiday because we have every year it's a different location. This year it happens to be here in the Houston area. Last year we were in Manhattan. There's whispers of us going to Hawaii for next Thanksgiving, but we travel. We've done Thanksgiving in Paris. We've done Thanksgiving in a dozen different pretty cool locations. So
how are you going to get the RV to Hawaii?
Well, it's going to take a lot of pontoons.
Hopefully you'll be in the RV by then.
Yeah, well, I'm not glued to the thing. I can actually get out and walk onto an airplane. It's not like I'm stuck in the RV forever.
Are you going to do that? Are you going to do that thing where you put the little mini car behind the RV and drive that around?
So the way we're doing this is not we're not buying a motorhome. We're actually buying a fifth wheel trailer and pulling it behind a Ford F-250 pickup. So we won't have to worry about dragging a car behind us. We'll be in the car. We just kind of figured that would be a little easier on us because then we can park and we still have a vehicle. And the motorhome thing is cool, but if the motorhome breaks down, you lose both the vehicle and your home for a while. So we kind of figured, and we get a better footprint with the trailer than we do with the RV. I'm actually going to be talking about this at length with on the Creative Pen podcast soon.
Really?
Yeah.
So is that a talk you've already had that'll be coming out soon, or are you?
No, I'm interviewing with her in the first couple of weeks of December, and then it's going to probably go live after the first of the year.
I was going to say, yeah, because she's usually a few weeks ahead, right?
Yeah, she
behind.
Yeah, behind, we'll say. So yeah, that's going to be cool. But yeah, this is a big adventure, and I'm going to do a podcast that connects to it. I'm thinking. I'm working on some stuff.
You're always keeping busy, that's for sure.
Yeah,
so speaking of which, before we wrap up here, Kevin, where's the best place for people to connect with you online? Find your books or you?
You can find, the best place is to come to kevintumlinson.com, which will lead you to books. You can also just look me up on any of your random online book retailers. I'm on all of them. So kevintumlinson.com is probably the best place.
Okay. And John, how about you?
It's john-l-monk.com. But just want to add in there, if anybody reads The Long Walk by Stephen King and they love it as much as I do, send me a note to john.l.monk1 at gmail.com. I just love to hear it. So, because when I read it, I emailed everybody about it. So,
yes,
I will read that.
We've talked about it before here. Like, that's definitely one of my all-time favorite Stephen King stories. What I've been trying to remember though is it in the Bachman books or is it a different?
I think it is.
It is a Bachman book. That's what I thought.
And I didn't know this, by the way. Stephen King in my mind, So.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Kevin?
Oh, nothing. I was gonna poke fun at John for his really memorable domain name.
Well, thanks again for coming, guys. It's been great chatting with you here, as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
And for listeners and viewers, we will talk to you next week. Have a great night guys, and happy Thanksgiving.
You too.